May we also welcome our specialist in the house. Let's welcome Vipin Luthra, the Senior Director and Head IT, PepsiCo. Let's also welcome Sachin, Bhalla, VP and Country GM, Secure Power Division, Schneider Electric, India. Ladies and gentlemen, let's also welcome Deveshri Patel, Head of Information Technology, Adani, and Sankaranarayanan R, CT&DO, IndiaFirst Life Insurance. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome them with we know the drill, with a good round of cheer. Thank you very, very much. It feels good to have the first panel taking the shape. And Amit, can I please request you to take charge?
Thank you. Is it working? Yeah, perfect. So, good evening, everyone. I think I got a very interesting panel to talk about how digital is changing the virtual world, how emerging technologies is coming. And it's a very interesting place to be in at a time when we are just coming out of a lockdown and hoping that nothing will get disrupted now with all the things which we are hearing for last 4 or 5 days. So I have a group of experts with me. What we will try to do, we will try to look at what is happening in the world of emerging technology, how emerging technologies are changing how the way we work. There are the experts here who actually have managed very diverse workforce, very, very differentiated workforce in the period of lockdown. There are experts who are building new use cases based on some of the emerging technologies. There are experts here who actually are looking at how can they exploit the metaverse. And what we will try to do over the next 45 minutes is to understand from them what is happening in this space, what are the trends, what are the focus areas, and how can we build more on that. So that's the whole idea for the next 45 minutes. What I will try to do is to cover this session in about 35 odd minutes and keep final 10 minutes for any of you to ask any questions which you have from the experts so that we can have it much more interactive. So that's the whole idea. So let me just start without having much of the context setting as such, and maybe I start with you, Shankar, per se, and the topic which we were talking about. You come from an insurance as a sector, and insurance is literally a high-touch business, right? So you have agents all over the place, and effectively for last 2 years, we were in lockdown, right? So everything, perhaps if happening through digital. At least the results of the company says most of the companies have done well. So how did you manage it, and how technology has helped you to basically look at your diverse and differentiated workforce across regions and across cities, and how were you able to manage the communication with them and run the business?
Thanks, Amit. I think it's a wonderful, interesting question too. So you said insurance is a touch-based one, rightly said, and it's also trust-based one. Right. So people buy insurance based on whom they know and how, and based on that only they buy, correct? And now suddenly with the COVID, and then you can't meet people, but you need to do the business. Now we have to engage with them and increase the trust quotient through digital means, correct? That's one thing which is very important for us to sustain the business. That's the first thing which we are looked at. So how are we going to help our team to engage with the customers first? And to get new customers, what we do, correct? Obviously, yes, for us, the meeting host of meeting technologies which were all available, like whether it's MS Teams or whether it is Zoom, those are all the first thing which came to this thing for us to help with it. Next is that, okay, now I'm helping them, but I need to handhold them. So now next one is that, okay, why not we use the co-browsing? Then is that, okay, then I'm using the co-browsing. I have to move from a paper to a paperless situation using digital. So how much I'm going to reduce? And here also the teams are all distributed. And the paper has to move. Yes, we had workflow in place and scanning place. Now scanning can't happen. It has to happen at the phones. And now you have to read the data. So we engaged more about AI, OCR on those things, and then to get the data out of it so that we get the data and then send it across and engage with them using, now I had to do a KYC. Then we got into video KYC, correct? How can we, so each and every stage we started looking at it to say that how I am going to use digital and how I am going to increase the trust, because without trust, insurance is not there. It's completely trust-based business. So it was an interesting journey, but I think we touched each and every touch point. I can proudly say that maybe 99.6% of my new business happens through digital without any paper. Correct. So that's what we have reached to. Is 0.4% is still there, but yeah, that's what even customer servicing. So we had to give them each and every opportunity to move from a traditional wherein people used to go to a branch and then talk to them and then get it done. So now they have to do it by themselves. For all they have to do it by themselves, we need to be very, very lucid in explaining to them on each and every step. We have to handhold them and then get them to do it. So we did a lot of design thinking exercise, and we had to do it very quickly. And we have to, I think we had phases wherein we started off with something, we reimagined it, and then made it better to reach whatever we are here today.
No, that's very interesting. So what you are saying is that you were able to digitize the whole value chain up to some extent and move most of the business to the digital channels.
Yeah, so claims, for example, like another thing, correct? Claims is an important thing wherein that's where they realize the insurance value, correct? So almost like 100% of the claims used to come by means of a snail mail. Now almost everything, almost 90% of them comes through digitally to us, correct? Each and everything. So, and they also get their claims money in no time. Maybe the UPI also helped us to make sure that, yes, we are just piggybacked on the UPI to make sure that the money goes to them at the fastest pace which is possible. So when we are doing things, there are various things which are all happening in the ecosystem too, correct? Which helped us to fast track things.
Perfect. Right. So I actually take three very clear learnings from you. One, look at the value chain and each point what you are able to digitize. Second, this was more an ecosystem-driven thing. So because the ecosystem was also developing, you can actually utilize technology and the digital world much better because of the ecosystem, right? That's very interesting. Let me come to you, ma'am. You come from one of the large multinational which are actually considered to be doing some cutting-edge work in technology. So what are the kind of trends which you are seeing, and where do you think the focus is right now for your kind of business or your industry to focus on from an emerging technology perspective?
Yeah, so I would like to give you an example from our Dubai Expo 2020. So PepsiCo was a formal partner in food and snacks side for Dubai Expo 2020. So here we have launched our 3 pavilions, and we demonstrated our first unmanned store that's called Pepsi Go. It was completely based on AI, artificial intelligence, computer vision, and weight sensors. So we had our partnership with MasterCard. So it is just, people can tap at the gate with their payment card, go inside the store, pick up the product, and move out. It's like tap, grab, go, just a 3-step process. So just, giving our end consumers a feel of how the future technology looks into, and giving them great options on how do they interact with our products. So this is one example. The other is on our Aquafina drop station, where we launched our Aquafina smart water stations. Those are completely technology-enabled water stations. This is also keeping in mind the sustainability agenda of reducing the single-use plastic to the environment and making this planet a better place to live. So how these water station work is that there are reusable water bottles with the QR code that can be enabled on this water stations. And once the water station is activated, the end consumers, they can choose what kind of water they want, whether it is still, sparkling, the flavor that they want, and the intensity of the flavor. So it is completely giving them a personalized experience. So this is how, we are trying to explore on how we use our future technology in making our consumers, giving them a great experience, and see that they have various ways to interact with our products.
That's very interesting. I'm personally intrigued by the Pepsi Go or the fruit store without this thing. I know Amazon was trying to do it for some time, but it's really good to hear it from a product company actually moving there. Now, I think one of the things which perhaps I will come to you, Sachin, is we heard there are various industries and various sectors trying to make a lot of application about using newer technologies per se and technologies which are coming. Solve for the infrastructure which can run the newer technology and what are the trends happening on that space? Because you come from that kind of an industry where your industry supports the data centers and the newer technologies from that angle. So where are we? What is getting developed there?
Okay, so I think what's happening is that overall data consumption has increased quite a lot in the last 2-3 years, and and this was not expected. I think COVID made it happen, and now the trajectory is very, very good. And what has happened is people have gotten comfortable with using data, with using different applications. So what we are seeing and what the industry is seeing is that there is a big investment happening in terms of data structure, data center capacity. And what we see is in the next 2-3 years, the capacity will actually double as compared to where we are right now. So there's huge investment. You can imagine whatever has been built in the last 15 years will be built again in the next 3 years. So that's the kind of investment happening in the data center industry. And it's happening because of these new applications that everybody is expecting will be developed. For example, Metaverse, for example, more AI, more VR-led applications. And all of that will require a lot more data to be stored. So all that investment is happening at the back end, but it's not just data centers being built. What's happening is that the whole architecture of where these data centers are being built is also changing. So earlier, majority of data centers, let's say, were in Mumbai. Now everybody is developing not just in Mumbai, but in Noida, in Chennai, in Calcutta, so that latency is good. And I see that discussions have also started of building edge data centers in tier 2, tier 3 towns. Now, all of that investment is happening to ensure that when these new applications come in, then we are able to offer a very good latency, right? I think in the previous discussion, we were talking about how databases can get high latency, but you also want data stored to be delivered to you within milliseconds, within very, very less time, and that's edge data center will help. And once this 5G rollout happens, I think what will happen is the new mobile phones already have very good quality microprocessors, very fast microprocessors. With 5G, the speed issue to the nearest data center gets solved. And with edge data centers, you don't have to go back to Mumbai from, let's say if you're in Lucknow, you don't have to go to Mumbai to get your data. Your data will reside there in Lucknow. So that also takes care of it. So whole architecture at the back end is evolving to make sure the latency is very good, and the new age applications which require faster, communication with servers, that can happen.
Right. I think, Sachin, this is very interesting, and knowing that we're actually going to spend so much of money over the next 2 or 3 years on that overall data infrastructure and perhaps making a lot of other technologies enabled as such. Maybe I come to you, Deveshri. You actually have worked across the spectrum. You have worked in data. You are working with a lot of emerging technology, and you now looking at a industry which is considered to be not so advanced when it comes to use of emerging technology. So, what are the trends which you are seeing, which is happening in the reality industries? What kind of emerging technologies they are using, and what kind of use cases they are seeing it's getting popular there?
Yeah, sure, Amit. So you rightly said, and I agree that I think the digital adoption in this sector as compared to other sectors is really slow. Reason being, the world is working on building connected homes, but I think we are still comfortable locking our doors with a physical key and keeping it in our pocket. I think the trust comes from there only for us. So I think it's slightly delayed, in my opinion, but we are certainly catching up, I would say. Among many personas in reality sector, there are three key pillars: buyer, seller, and builder. And we see a different digital trends in all the three personas. So when it comes to a buyer, I think they are using technology more because their decision making is so much dependent on data coming from multiple sources, be it information coming from the corporations, law, the builder himself, the comparative assessments. There are so many websites and applications available out in the market that they have a huge source of information coming their way, which is helping them take their decisions. Their preference in the reality has also changed. People are believing in smarter living, smarter buildings, etc. So I think the demand has slightly changed. When we look at the seller community, then I think different trends are emerging even there. I think the sellers are also using AI, ML a lot for their market research to take an appropriate decision on how to utilize a particular land parcel, for example. They are also leveraging these technologies for better customer segmentation so that based on the segment of the customer, their sales strategies could be defined. Lot of campaigning and all of that is also digital aided now. So that is another trend coming in that segment. Now the most important in the heart of the whole sector is the building part of it. Interestingly, I also presume when I gotten into this sector that probably what is there to do in this, when it comes to digital. But now I see that you'll see a lot of usage of 3D, 2D printing, which is supporting people who are doing the construction to reduce their lead time. It is making them, possible to construct complicated designs, some of the prefabricated designs that can be directly plug and play. So that is definitely one trend. The other trend which is very popular is the drone-based monitoring. So not just the construction monitoring, but even safety, for safety, people are using drone-based monitoring ecosystems. Apart from that, of course, to the core of the business, people are working towards building connected homes, leveraging IoT technologies. So I think these are some of the important digital trends that we see in the realty sector.
Well, it's very interesting, ma'am, what you talked about, because the way you compartmentalize it is that look at from a seller and a builder and a buyer perspective, and that becomes very, very interesting to understand how the technology is being used. Let me actually come back to you, ma'am, again, Vipin. So when Deveshri talked about, she anyway had said that the technology is moving further to the drone-based, there's a 3D printing, there's a lot of AI work which is happening, right? Whereas particularly an organization which is very marketing focused, the metaverse suddenly has become a buzzword. I don't know whether it's a fad or a buzzword or there's something which is real happening. Means we all will have our own point of view. So what will be your point of view on metaverse? Where you think it's going, what it is, how will you define it?
See, metaverse is totally a new buzzword, and most of the organizations are still in the exploration phase on what does this mean for them. I personally feel that pre-COVID, we all were working from office, and then COVID forced all of us to work remote. But now it is a hybrid world. Means the new ways of working are still evolving. It's very important that we make our workforce feel inclusive, whether they are working remote or in office. I believe Metaverse will play a big role in unlocking these challenges, in making all our people feel inclusive. And also, it is important that people who are working remote, how do we bring them effectively into our in-person meetings in office? How do we bring their expression? How do we bring their body language into those meetings? So those are some of the use cases which definitely many of the organizations will explore. Some of the virtual events, like myself, have flown for Gurgaon to attend this event. Maybe in future with Metaverse, my digital twin will be sitting here and talking to you. So even in our training, in our the way we are recruiting, everything, I believe there is a lot of potential that Metaverse can bring, but it is really too early to comment on that.
Perfect. No, I think that's again very interesting that we will have a split personality. We will have one personality in the real world. We already have another one in the social media, as most of us typically end up having that. And then we will have another personality in the metaverse per se.
Exactly, yeah.
That will make the life much more complicated, that which one to manage and which one will go where, right? Well, that's very interesting view from you. If I may come to you and I may ask you, what are the trends which you are seeing because your, again, business is much more regional, and you see a city which is far more developed and maybe people have much better digital adoption. You may have smaller towns which may have differentiation. So what are the trends which you are seeing in the digital world, and what are the technologies which you are seeing actually emerging in that space?
Thanks, Amit. I think the key thing, I still bet on one thing, which is voice, correct? Voice in insurance is something which we have not taken to the next level. And in India, we travel 200 kilometers, the language changes, correct? And then the way the forms are in either majorly in English and maybe in the regional language, but how many people know what they are filling in? And that's something which is a question mark, correct? And somebody has to explain to them, and then they have a good earnings for them to get insured, but they may not have the time to do it, or they may not understand and give the right input for us to really properly underwrite. So I feel that the voice is something, if at all I can make sell through selling through voice, wherein I read out the form to them, and then it's conversational AI based voice, conversational AI plus voice is something which I think will help my business, and giving more green time to my sales team, and also to each of those buyers, correct? To buy it with the kind of confidence what they want to buy. So that is one thing which I think is going to make, in my view, I still bet on it, voice plus conversational AI. That is one thing. The second thing is that I still feel, I think Vipin mentioned about the current situation, like it's a hybrid, working from home. We have some use cases. I don't know whether how it will happen, because we are all doing a travel with vengeance today, and people are going to various places, but I don't know whether this travel will continue, correct? You go to travel and then you want to meet that person, but that person is going to work from home. The objective is not going to be met, but if at all you are going to bring them here and then able to converse with them, the kind of this thing, it should not be the like wherein in Zoom you make a call and then other person, you don't know what they are doing, but you make it interactive. Those kinds of interactive discussions and other things are something which are all possibility, still early days. But in terms of technology, what I will suggest is that what I'm betting on is that instead of more than new technologies, I always go for new technologies, but whatever has stabilized so far, I want to still bet on more, correct? So in insurance, you have, for example, starts with identifying, then onboarding, then you have engaging, enriching, servicing, and claims, various stages. I just wanted to make sure that each of the processes, I have to do an AML proofing, correct? To make sure that each of the process I have AML, wherever it is to be embedded, it's to be embedded. So, and have I used bots properly? Is my bot currency has increased, so that I can automate, wherein I can automate, bring down the errors, make it more efficient, more convenient to the customers. That's the second thing. The third thing is that microservices based architecture, because insurance is legacy business, and with so many applications and other things, we can't have the product change is something which takes a lot of time. So for us to come up with new products in tune with the time, we have to have a microservices based architecture. So that's the API currency which I have to increase that. So these are all the things which we need to go further into it to make sure that we sweat what we have got. At the same time, look at these things like conversational AI plus voice, Metaverse, and then see if there are some use cases coming up. Go and bet on it, and then if it succeeds, well and good, adapt it more.
Perfect. No, it's a very good point, Shankar, that we should ensure that whatever we do it well, beside taking the new leaps as such, because otherwise the things will not stabilize. Maybe I will come to Sachin. So here, when we are hearing the experiences of what are the trends, we are hearing it from the customer perspective and the market perspective, and what the organizations and the industries are doing. Right? You actually will be seeing the trend from a different side of the table, right? So you are seeing that what kind of demand which some of these organizations are putting in. And we heard about drone or AR, VR, we heard about 3D printing, we heard about Metaverse. So what are the trends which you are seeing happening in this space, and where you see what technologies will find space in the future?
Okay, so see, I think what we are forgetting when we talk about all this is all of this is going to be very, very energy intensive. You can imagine all this requires huge amount of processing, huge amount of powering the databases. So the the biggest thing we all have to work on is how do we make that sustainable? Because, remember, I mentioned earlier, we are talking about doubling the capacity in 3 years. And I'm not saying doubling what was done in 5 years is done in 3 years. I'm talking about what was done in 15 years is being put up in 3 years, and it's not going to stop. Believe me, even with whatever capacity will be put, we will still be short given what all new kind of application is coming. I'm sure if you look at Metaverse, the amount of data, the amount of processing that is required would be 5 times, 10 times what is required by a Microsoft Teams and so on, right? So with that, what becomes essential is how do you build the capacities, the backends that you are doing, which are more sustainable, less energy consuming, at the same time they are reliable. I mean, you don't want 3 avatars to be disappearing when you're in the middle of conversation, right? I mean, we are India. I mean, whatever infra we build, there are a lot more risks, right? Power can go. I mean, nobody cares if the power goes for 2 minutes, right? It's like 2 minutes
good.
happens. Doesn't happen if you're in the middle of a metaverse with your avatar, giving a presentation. So in my mind, a lot of work that we are doing as a company, that the industry is doing, and what is required is around how do we make whatever new builds are happening more sustainable? How do we make them more reliable?
Right. And I think you made a very interesting point. I think 2 points. One is the sustainability part, because if they're going to consume much more energy and going to create much more problem, I still have to solve it from an environment perspective, and that's going to happen. And secondly, a very important point is, are we ready for the pace at which we are going to grow, or at least the data trace which we are leaving is going to grow, both from the associated infrastructure perspective, or I think the word which you used earlier, the ecosystem perspective, that whether the ecosystem is going to grow this thing. That's very interesting. Maybe I come to you, Deveshri, because you actually been one of the profound data expert per se, and you are seeing that, okay, when I actually have one of my avatar, I create a lot of data trace and all of that going to happen. What are the other use cases which you are seeing, or what are the new data sources which are coming in? And one, if I go into Metaverse, I create my avatar, I anyway will start giving much more data trace. What are the other newer data sources which are coming in our hand to exploit from a perspective?
So from the futuristic standpoint, I think that was an excellent point, by the way, on the energy front. And in fact, in the reality also, people are consciously working towards building, green homes, self-healing buildings, in fact. And that itself, in fact, is going to be one of the data, source, in my opinion. Because end of the day, whatever information that you gather around this, Amit, you are going to, it's going to be like a bank, wherein this energy is going to be, all the parameters around that are going to be stored under name, under some custody. You use it when you need it. You preserve it when you don't need it. You let others use it, and you may monetize it or whatever. I mean, it's a loud thought, but then I'm just saying that this itself, I feel, is one good use case for future. Second one, Metaverse, of course. It surprises me that people have already started buying, selling real estate over Metaverse. So, so I think it's already there. And I personally had a view a month ago whether how successful it would be. But then I think gone are those days when we would build a product, sell it in the market, and then see how successful the product is. Nowadays, I think the whole product building starts after doing the research on what consumer wants. So I'm sure when we are, working on these kind of a technology, I'm sure there is a demand to it, and definitely it will see a light of the day. So that is definitely a second trend from the future standpoint. And third one, which is very important, and I personally think it is difficult to realize it in India, but I see a lot of usage of blockchain coming in future. the whole housing contract and all of that can actually go on a blockchain. This one technology wherein a lot of dependencies, intermediate dependencies can be avoided. The whole housing contractual process, if you look at, there are so many parties involved. The buyer himself, the seller, the license, legal, if you are taking it on loan, then banking. So there are so many parties involved. So I think it has a lot of potential. If everything comes on a blockchain, I think it would not just reduce the overall lead time, it would create a experience that a customer definitely needs, because it is a very cumbersome and difficult process today. And most importantly, it will create a trust factor. So I think that is a third futuristic use case, I think, coming our way.
Perfect. No, I think this is very interesting. I think you spoke about trust, you spoke about trust, you spoke about trust. So trust is becoming another important factor when we are looking at data. I think personally, I am very convinced that somebody else knows more about me than I know about myself, even today. And I think if we will have more data, what will happen, I don't know. That's very, very clear. Maybe Shankar, I come back to you again. So like Deveshri spoke about some of the new use cases which are getting developed. You must also be seeing some new use cases happening in your industry as such, new data sources coming into play. So what's your view or what's your perspective about that?
Okay, I think your question has two parts. Maybe I will. The new sources of data, correct? Basically, so if you look at insurance in India, the penetration of insurance is on the lower side, correct? We are, when compared to the West, we are on the lower side. We have to get more people insured, correct? That's the key. So how can we do it? Because for many people, insurance itself is something like they move away from it. They look at it from various aspects and then they don't go for it. The key is we have to increase the penetration. We have to do it in a very convenient way for the customer too. So here is where I think one of the things what is happening now in the market is that it's all about embedded insurance. So when you go for a lending, correct, you cover that lending amount with some sort of in case something happens to that the person who has taken the loan, that lending part is covered, correct? That is one aspect. Then covering the person who has taken the loan, that's the second part comes in. So now you need to embed it. You may embed it as part of each of the places where they are transacting with, whenever, whatever it is going to be. For example, when you are traveling by a car, maybe during that period you want to be insured. That's a part. It may be a small sachet insurance or a bite insurance, correct? But the bite-size insurance. But the thing is that you need to have it embedded as part of it so that at least people understand that, okay, insurance is very important for them. There has been a good awareness due to COVID. For insurance, I think we have seen a fantastic uptake in the last 2 years. But the thing is that even this is not going to be enough for us to do that. We need to make sure that insurance is part of everything. So that is where, so I can't sell to insurance to everyone. I need to understand about the customer too. So here is where within the embedded insurance, I need to understand about the customer. For example, when underwriter of a loan understands, okay, the buying pattern, what are all the credit aspects of the customer, I also need to understand what are all other things, what I'm going to understand. So that the data points have to come from the source of each of the embedded places for me to underwrite the insurance part of it. That's one aspect. Second aspect on the data part, I think data. More the data, more merrier it is. So we can understand more, we can go personalized way, and then we can really pitch for insurance in a better way. But the aspect is we get very less data. People don't give data. So we have to look out for the data in a very easiest way possible so that we understand about the customer more and pitch it very properly. Can I use third-party data? Fantastic. But I think there are going to be regulations which is going to stop third-party data going to come into picture. So once again, I'll go to the ecosystem, correct? Ayushman Bharat. Once again, it is a fantastic initiative where you will come to know about the health part of the consumer very in a better way. So if I'm able to piggyback on that, maybe I will get some more data about the consumer. And account aggregator is another initiative which has really helped. You get to know about the account financial part of the customer in a the easiest way possible. Surrogates, correct? With the AI OCR, you can get more surrogates. You can understand it. You can also understand the efficacy of the documents which are being shared, correct? So earlier, maybe a fake document is given. I may use the fake document. I may underwrite it. But now I have the ability to understand whether the document is a true document or not, and use a surrogate to underwrite it. So there are various data sources which are all coming in. We need to identify which data, which we can get it, and then so that we use the data, mine it properly, unstructured, once again, correct? Voice and this thing has got enormous amount of this thing. You can go deep into it and then do much more. A lot of use cases, but first is to get as much as data possible and identify the usability of it and then go for it.
Perfect. So that's very interesting. I have a very straight question for you, and you said that as an insurer, you are building new products. So will you be able to insure a Metaverse avatar? Or when do you think the Metaverse avatar will start getting insured?
I think that will happen for sure, right? When a ship can be insured, why not a Metaverse avatar can't be insured?
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting perspective which you are giving, that yes, the life is changing and the data is becoming more and more interesting. And the ecosystem development is a very, very interesting point. Maybe I come to you, Vipin, and again, in your industry, what are the kind of new use cases which you are seeing? Also, what are the kind of new data sets which you are looking at? And this could be for any functions of yours per se.
So I would like to share about our IoT platform, which is called PepSense. So PepsiCo recently developed this platform which interacts with the machines and gets the real-time data from the environment. So that is one of the important platform where we are trying to integrate many of our use cases to get the real-time insights from our machines and environment, and build some meaningful actions out of those. So that is one. Other is, the first party consumer data on how are our consumers interacting with our products, how they are buying, in what combination they are buying. That's another important use case where we are trying to explore. I say with all these things, our data analytics platform is a big priority. And there are use cases in all the areas, whether it is revenue management, whether it is in-store execution, promotion management. So everything, the way users are seeing the products, the way they are buying the products, it's end-to-end.
Right. That's a very interesting one, and maybe at some point in time, it's going to be all into the virtual world per se. Maybe I come to you, Sachin, and again ask you a very simple question which we are hearing. Right? There are new use cases getting developed per se. Now, some of the data is actually also being used to manage data better. Right? There's also a lot of AI and a lot of analytics and a lot of digital technologies being used to manage data better. Right? Do you think the way we manage data will change, or we will still have those bulky data centers which will keep coming up? As you rightly said, they are energy jugglers and they will keep on taking a lot of technology. So do you think in some time there will be a breakthrough where my data center will be also in a chip and can move around?
Data center is already in the chip. I mean, if you compare what data is stored in your phone as compared to,
Right.
what a floppy disk used to store, I would say data center is in your phone. Having said that, what we are observing is the bigger data centers are getting even bigger. If earlier people were talking about setting up a 2 megawatt data center, now they're talking about 100 megawatt data centers. Because you can imagine a large user, I mean, let's say a metaverse platform, how much would be the requirement of that particular one consumer?
Right.
That one consumer might itself consume 40, 50 megawatt in terms of space, I mean, in terms of capacity that is needed. So that is happening, but we are generating so much data. We are we are needing so much of compute that we will have explosion of processing capacity, explosion of, uh, you know, whatever I would say, databases in our phone, in edge data center, and as well as in the large colos. Everything will become bigger.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. Uh, I have a request to audience. We have about 7 or 8 minutes left. If any of you have any question with any of the panelists, do let me know. I will try to include that and ask that. Please feel free to ask if you have any question to any of the panelists per se. Right? If you not have the question, I will obviously keep on asking the questions and try to get more information out of them. But if you, Yeah, sure, please. Uh, can we have a mic, please?
You can use this one, I'll share.
Yeah, we also, when we are handling emerging technologies, we also look at a fast fail strategy. So I would like maybe a quick answer from at least two of the panelists to tell us where things have failed. Couple of examples where things have failed and why.
Okay, so if I may repeat your question so that we understood it right. So you are saying that there has been things where the things have failed when we are trying to adopt a technology. So you want some examples where things have failed, right? Is that correct? Right. Deveshri, you want to go first?
So there are multiple factors, but I think the first and the foremost is planning for the moon. That becomes a very difficult, goalpost, especially since the series is about data. So in case of data, for example, so a lot of people think that we'll cleanse it all, we'll gather it all, we'll process it all. Practically, it doesn't work. Like all the data lakes and lake houses kind of a philosophies we have seen, that if we think of identifying all the data points that are required for the use case, bringing everything together, process it, uh, it is a very time-taking exercise. And sometimes, I mean, even if you do it all, it would never be 100%. By the time you finish cleansing existing data, the new data set would come up. So I think that is where sometimes the strategies don't work. So I think we need to be very specific in terms of what do we want to achieve, and for that, how autonomous we could be. Like in case of data only, we've learned it from our own experiences. That's why I'm sharing. Doing it all didn't work. So probably picking up a use case and then bringing relevant data for it and then processing it more through a data fabric, as in flipping the whole model rather than bringing it to a data lake. I think that's what work in data.
Any more response to him? Anyone?
I can add. I think what we have seen is the more data gathering devices you have, the more is the chances of failure. Unless you really work to make sure you have very good architecture. Let's say you have 100 machines and you have an application. If you are reading from those 100 devices, if one has some problem, it might actually create a problem in how your final application or answer is working. Second thing we have observed is, and this is my suggestion also, that whenever you are implementing a solution, don't think of any of these solutions as one-time investment. You have to look at one-time investment and continuous improvement in all of these things. Because after 3 months, you will figure out, okay, I need 2 more data points and I can do this better. You will do that, you will realize one sensor somewhere failed and the whole application is not working. So you have to think of this as an evolving journey instead of one-time investment, and after that you will get return for 20 years. It's not going to work like that. You have to look at one-time investment and continuous improvement.
And I think to add to what Sachin said, so that's the reason why we coined them as an emerging technology. So they are still emerging, right? So it's not stable as of now. So the technology life cycles have become quite small, and we are seeing the newer advancement in the technologies are happening much more faster than it used to be, which basically means I may need to change quite a lot, or whether it comes to my analysis or whether it's come to my use of data or anything else. Similarly, one other point which I think Sachin very well pointed out is the architectural design is becoming the key here, because if you don't have a architecture which can scale up with the data which is coming in, or which has ability to induct new data, you may have challenge later on per se. That's where it's going. Maybe there's a question there? Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you. Perfect.
There's a lot of these dynamics which are changing these days, and the law of the land also kind of comes in when you come at creating something. So innovation is to kind of simplify your life or add it to your top line and bottom line later on. But how are you tweaking this approach when you get to see the cybersecurity or the privacy requirements and the law of the lands also kind of converging into your strategy? So just want to understand from a sectoral standpoint, how has this impacted or what all steps you guys have taken?
Yeah. So, see, what I would say is, look, it's a complex field. It's simple. I mean, the simple answer is, as a user, the best way is to get the right partner to help you. There are enough technologies available to take care of your demands, but you have to on day one say, this is what I want. These are non-negotiable. Yes, I want that outcome, that application, but my need is that this level of security needs to be there, this level of, and I am not going to compromise. For example, I don't want to put anything on the cloud, okay, because there is a risk of data leakage. Or you can say, I need this level of security. Everything can be built. But important is you don't try to build it yourself. You get the right partner who knows all the technologies. You make sure you upfront specify that this is non-negotiable. They will design it for you. From a technology standpoint, all of that is not a challenge today.
Right. And maybe you use a lot of personal data. You have any point of view, Shankar, on this?
I think, see, in one another panel, somebody else mentioned this, correct? He said that he made a parallel to cybersecurity as a brake, and the business is to the accelerator. He said you can't put an accelerator and brake together, which I don't subscribe to it. But I think cybersecurity is something which is really, really very important, correct? I think like at a point of time, people used to worry about testing taking more time. But they realize that testing is very important because you reduce rework and other things, and they started spending time on testing. Likewise, I think this behavior has to be put into place, and then you have to plan for the proper cyber security testing, which is not only before any rollout, and also continuously you have to do it. You have to plan for it and you have to do it. It's something which has to be baked in whatever we do. It's something which is major threat. We have to understand that needs to be given time, and like Sachin mentioned, needs to be embedded in the design. Even if you're going to for a DevOps, use a DevOps, and then make sure that it is embedded and knowledge is given to people, correct? It's a lot of time, it's all about awareness. We need to create awareness, we need to do design, we need to invest time into that. That's the key.
Right. I think we have one last question. I think somebody on this table wanted to ask. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, panel. Enjoyed listening you guys. India seems to be, or India is recognized as a soft force in digital economy. When would India start fining Googles and Facebooks of the world, like UK, Australia, or Europe?
Right. Any thoughts?
It's coming, correct? Next year they have to do it.
Pardon?
It's coming. It's going to be the case. We not have.
We haven't fined Google, or we don't have guts to do that still. What's a maturity level? It's a serious question. It's a serious question.
No, let me answer that question. See, I think why do all these biggies come in US and China? Because the captive market there is much bigger than India market. But what I would say is, if there is Google or if there is Facebook there, we are also seeing a different breed of unicorns. I mean, we are calling them unicorns, which are emerging here. I mean, I will still call a Swiggy is an India company, a Byju's is an India company. So yes, we haven't got a Google or a Facebook here, but there are set of startup companies which were not the norm 10 years ago, which have started to come up. Whether I will say Ola, for example, is an India company. I mean, Uber came to India, but then Ola also came up. Flipkart was built ground up from being an Indian company. I would still treat it as an Indian company. Yes, it has been acquired by a US company. But I think three things have changed. One, from a venture capital availability standpoint, there's a lot of money that is coming that is helping Indian startups to rise up. Second thing that is happening is that government has made it easier for startups to actually form, to actually grow. There's a lot of support. I mean, it might not be visible, but there's a lot of support. And third thing is that the internet penetration in India has increased quite a lot. maybe not laptop-based internet penetration, but mobile phone. Um, Even with that, we are not seeing a lot of product-led startups. I would still call a Google and a Facebook a product startup. We are seeing a lot more commerce startup, but that's might be because the internet ready or the consuming class is much smaller in India as compared to a US or Europe. That's my thought process.
And I think you will see a lot of tech companies coming from India over the next 5 to 10 years. I think the next decade belong to us in terms of producing the product-based tech companies as such, per se. I know we are over time. I know you had a question, so you want to quickly ask that question?
I have a very different view. Like, I want to understand if anywhere in the industry, there's a thought emerging that we do more with less. Like plastics were invented maybe 150 years
Sorry,
back.
we can't hear you. Yeah, Mike.
Like plastics were invented 150 years back, and till 10 years back, everybody wanted to use more and more plastics. But we know the consequences today, and we want to reduce plastics. So is there a thought emerging that we do more with less data capturing?
So, okay, so I can perhaps take this question per se because I work with different spectrum of clients. I don't think there's a thought in terms of less data capture. I think there's definitely a thought in terms of how to use the data in the right way. That is different than less data capture. Will we get out of the digital world in 150 years? I don't know, because I think we are living in a dynamic world. Things will change. Right? We already have issues around e-waste and digital waste and all which is coming in. But as of now, at least I haven't heard people already talking about let's reduce the data capture per se, because it's in any way not useful for us. I don't know if you guys have heard something differently.
No, I think it hasn't reached that stage yet, but I think probably that stage will also come where people will question, are we putting, I mean, look, ultimately all of this boils down to how much energy you use. Okay, and that's where my view is we have to be working on that today to make sure whatever we are doing is sustainable and energy efficient. That thought process is going in a big way right now, and I think it will help us as a society, as a country, as a whole world. But that thought process is getting baked in, that cost or the amount of energy to be spent per unit of data needs to go down drastically. That thought process is happening.
Right. So I think with that, we will end this panel. We know we have taken about 4-5 minutes extra, and my apologies for that. And thank you, panelists. It's been a very, very interesting discussion. Thank you. Thank you for your time. And thank you, audience.
Thank you. Thank you.